Good morning. My name is Diana Patricia Castillo Arellano from the first semester of International Relations. On behalf of the Rector of the University, Dr. Francisco Javier Espinosa Romero, and the General Director of Student Affairs, Dr. Angélica Pastora Nieto Chavez, we welcome you with cordiality. I thank the support of the Public Relations Department and you, our students, faculty, administrators, and the general public who are with us today. The Directorate of Student Affairs through the Uninter Network for Peace, thank you for your presence. It is an honor to present Dr. Claudia Luiza, who studied psychoanalysis in Boston, has given several lectures and interviews for media such as ABC and on WGN9, writer of 2 books and an award winner. Today, she will present her book, The Making of Psychoanalysis, Case Studies in Emotional Education. Welcome, Doctor. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here, especially with a group of students that's interested in peace, because this is the hope for the future. It's the hope for the world. It's the hope for families. So I'm delighted to be here. My book is a textbook that explains how we help people come to inner peace. And in the textbook, I cover theory, I cover method, but there's really only one thing that's very important for everybody here to know, one central idea. And that is that we treat emotions and we deal with emotions, not with our brain, but with other emotions. The medicine for emotions is emotion. Now, this in psychoanalysis is a very far cry from Freud, because Freud believed in what he called interpretation, and that if you explain to people what they are suffering from and they know it, it means the unconscious is conscious and everything will be well. Well, guess what? We learned over the past 100 years that it doesn't work. It doesn't work to tell people the truth. It doesn't work to be reasonable. And even when we have a problem and we say to ourselves, next time I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be so shy. I'm not going to be so angry. I will never be disappointed. I will be strong. That when we get there, no matter how much we told ourselves with our higher brain up here, the emotions take over. So then the question begins, if insight doesn't work and truth doesn't work and reason doesn't work, what do we have? We have a mess. We have distortion. We have hopelessness. We have despair. We have dead-end roads where we think, oh, I'm just so stupid, or that person is just so evil. And so what we learned is there is a way to get off of this dead-end road. And the way to get off it is to learn how not to be at war with ourselves. And this is not by learning anything. You can know everything about yourself. It won't help you with the war against yourself. And what happens when there's war is that there's a division. There is a division of 2 separate camps that cannot figure out how to get along. And this, we discovered, was the fundamental problem in personality disorders, that certain impressions, an impression of disappointment, an impression of anger, an impression of frustration, certain of these impressions created a disturbance. In other words, it's not just anger. It's not just disappointment. It's an illness around those impressions. So this means if you have an illness around these things, that you can't feel them. You're allergic to them. They hurt too much. You have to stay organized. You have to put one foot in front of the other. So then You push off the parts of yourself that are disturbing, and they are over here, and you are over there, and you don't have the wholeness. For peace to happen, you have to be whole. The division has to be cured, and you have to be at peace with everything about yourself. All of the disturbances around impressions, so that you can finally experience your impressions without a disturbance, so that you can be angry and disappointed and know everything about other people and know everything about yourself and be at peace with it. And this is where psychoanalysis completely changed, and where it stopped being an interpretive method and became more of an investigative method to find out why people are so disturbed by certain emotions and impressions. It's never about the toothpaste cap being off the toothpaste. You know how people always complain, oh, they get so upset over these little things. It's not the little things that are upsetting, it's the disturbance around what gets aroused. And each one of us is very different. I can't experience your disturbance. If you tell me that you're disturbed by the leaves falling off the trees, I don't understand that. That's just autumn. Why does it upset you so much? They get raked up, they grow up next year. This makes absolutely no sense. So it's very difficult to do psychoanalysis because things do not make sense. And we have to learn why this person is disturbed by the leaves falling off the trees. And it's very, very, very difficult work because we want to tell people, look, they're going to grow back again next year. This is not a big deal. But that is the interpretive method. It's reasonable. It doesn't work. So we have to sit with the person until we learn what it is about the leaves falling off the trees that is so disturbing. And the day that a patient can tell us and explain it to us, and that we can understand it, is the day that they will not be disturbed by it. When you speak and learn to find words for your experience, then you have peace and you become whole. And the job of the psychoanalysis is to sit through the most unbelievably strange stories that make absolutely no sense, and to get curious, and you go deeper and deeper, and you find new pathways of things to talk about. You get off the dead-end roads where there just things make no sense, and you keep the patient talking, and then eventually the patient's consciousness expands, and they say, you know, when the leaves start falling off the trees, it's an unbearable feeling of time being lost. And I lost a lot of time because I was with my parents who didn't treat me well, and I didn't feel alive. And then the patient says, oh, it's not so bad to see the leaves falling off the trees. Only when the tree is bare does it really hurt. And then you start to understand what it is about the bareness of the tree. And the more the patient can bring you into their experience. Now, before patients can bring you into the experience, they tell you about their life. I am so angry at my sister. My sister's greedy. She wants everything from me. And you think that the problem is about the sister. And you work on the relationship with the sister, and you work on how to talk. But the disturbance doesn't get touched upon. And people stay for years trying to say, I know I have a right to be angry with my sister. I know my sister is a terrible person. And they still cannot really feel comfortable with the sister and with their anger, because you're still not talking about the disturbance. You're still just talking about the sister and reality. And it takes a long time to realize something happens to me when my sister grabs a French fry off of my plate. Something happens to me that is deeply, I feel invisible, or I feel like my sister wants to kill me and she never wanted me alive, and maybe my parents didn't want me alive, and maybe I don't know how to live. And as soon as the story unfolds and you can really just talk about the pure, you start to recognize your disturbance, then you are really on your way to being analyzed. So from the perspective of a psychoanalyst, the problem is never that the right solution isn't there. The problem is that we don't know what the disturbance is. So none of us ever feel that we are crazy. Nobody feels they're crazy. They may say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, as a way to describe how they feel. But no one will ever tell you, you know, I have a disturbance around something and I really have to work on it. Because we can't see ourselves. We can only feel organized with our story. So this is the problem that faces society and that faces children who have been abused, or had a tough life. They don't see their tough life. It's what's normal to them. We all feel normal. We feel fine. We don't know that we are suffering. We don't know how hard we are on ourselves. We don't know that some of the pain that we experience is a disturbance. And this is the challenge to psychoanalysis, is how to stop things from being normalized and for people to start to wake up to their pain, wake up to how invisible they feel, wake up to why there's so much fear, or why people, when they feel invisible, go into the rage brain and then they're screaming and they don't think they're disturbed. They think somebody's upset them. So when you start to realize your own spiritual deficits and you start to realize how at war you are with yourself, and you start to welcome yourself in a new way, and when you feel disturbed, you can say, oh, I'm disturbed now, so now I have to figure out how to take care of myself, not control society, not come up with a new narrative, but simply learn how to be with myself so that I can be comfortable, so I can be at peace. That is the process that you know you have had a good analysis and that you are on your way to learning how to find comfort, to get away from things that don't feel good, to draw yourself closer to things that work for you, and to connect to others so that you can feel loved and effective. So this is my mini lecture on the problem of peace, which is the problem of knowing what the real problem is and having a method of investigation that takes things and keeps things moving in a current of life where you can get off a dead-end road and have a new door open or a new path to walk down, so you can make your way towards peace. And it's challenging work. I hope that some of the questions that will come up will bring us to some of the theory that you have to know that gives you a basis for investigation, theories of the mind in my case. And I think if you are studying sociology or political science, you similarly have theories of economics. And then there's methods, which is how do you communicate to people when they are being crazy and they don't know it and you know it? without being able to tell them what they're doing or what's wrong with them. How do you be with people to keep them moving and growing? So these are some of the things that you have to know being a psychoanalysis. You have to have a foundation of theory, you have to have a foundation of method, and then you have your own personality to bring in, your own feelings as an instrument. So I would be happy to take any questions around how we deal with insanity.
Thank you so much for the little presentation, Doctor. It's really interesting, this theme of the psychoanalysis and how deep it can get to each individual, right?
Yeah.
We will now move on to the question session, if you are okay with that.
Yes.
So we've been having some questions sent through the chat. The first one we got is, can the psychoanalysis, how can you work ways to find a disturbance?
You become, in psychoanalysis, like an undercover cop. You have to get into the person's mental system. You have to be welcomed inside the person's mental house. And there's a clinical method, and this is called the contact function. The contact function means that you follow the patient's contact. The patient contacts you. You don't introduce your own idea. So you don't say to the patient, you know, leaves grow back on a tree, because that's not the patient's idea. Instead, you say to the patient, when the leaves fall off the tree, this is a tremendous sadness that comes upon you. You can tell the patient how they're feeling. You get in, you strive to pretend that what is happening is not crazy. And you say, when did it start? You ask all sorts of questions about it. And then the patient lets you in. The goal is never to help the patient feel better. The goal is always to keep the patient talking. And this is where psychoanalysis is very different from other mental health practices that really do want the patient to feel better. This is not the way to cure in psychoanalysis. In psychoanalysis, we are with the patient in suffering, always. As long as the patient is not alone, they will let us in more and more. We are never in opposition to the patient. You just stay with the patient until there's more and more unfolding. And as the patient's consciousness expands, because they are no longer alone, because they have spoken things they did not even realize, that's how change occurs naturally. Change is a side effect of becoming an undercover cop and being with the patient on their journey.
This also has, I guess, a lot to do about the communication with the patient, right?
Yes.
We also got a question about that, exactly. It says, in order to do an effective communication, what should I do?
That is a question that it took me 15 years of study to answer. What you have to do to make an effective communication is learn a new technique in psychoanalysis called emotional communication, which is the technique that has effectively replaced interpretation. For example, I had a colleague who was working in a prison with a woman who was an arsonist. She would set fire to everything. And she would not work with any therapist. She said, this is stupid. I have nothing to say. And my friend Vincent went to work with her, and he gave her an emotional communication. And he said, you should have been a fireman. And the patient instantly recognized that he understood her love of fire and that he wanted to help her to do something effective with her love of fire, and she agreed to keep talking to him because he gave her the right emotional communication. So he used some theory about how a patient needs to be joined. He used a clinical method of joining with the patient. The theory is how to strengthen the defense. You never try to tell a patient, stop being defended. You strengthen the defense. You have a love of fire. And the method was to join the patient in the feeling that fire is a good thing. And then he used his own feelings. He had to get over his horror of this woman. So when you study emotional communication, you know how to design an intervention. Now, in addition to that, I also want to say, for a very, very quick answer that doesn't require years and years of study, that you always want to learn where a patient wants to go. Does the patient want to stay with the problem and talk about it, or do they want to get away from the problem? And you really want to find out immediately what the patient wants help with, and then you want to help them in that direction. Some people want to stay married, some people want to get divorced. You don't decide what to help a patient with. You find it out, and that will help you get inside the patient's psyche as a welcome friend, as an ally, as a soulmate, until the patient speaks what they need to speak to be cured.
Thank you, Doctor. We have another question here in the chat. Is it possible to know that emotions are the ones that are affecting you in your life? How could you help yourself not to be affected in your life?
The mystery that we are all unconscious about is what our brain is doing. So we start with a problem. The leaves falling off the trees, my sister hurts me, I get too disappointed, I get too angry. And eventually, if you can turn that problem into a question, and you can learn what it is about this problem that hurts you so much, and then you will, I think, stand a better chance of being helped with that problem. Because you see, we're very hard on ourselves. And if we feel that we are weak, or that we are not effective, or we see a weak something in ourselves that we don't like, where maybe we're too shy, we get too angry, we can't talk, we want this problem to go away, we want to be better. And then you're at war with yourself because you're treating yourself very roughly, instead of comforting yourself and saying, why is this so difficult for yourself? What do you need to feel safe? What do you need to feel effective? Or why can't you fail? Why can't you be bad at something? Instead of being in the peaceful place, we want to fix the problem and make it go away. We want to be strong. We want to be peaceful. We want to be smart. We want to be all of these things. So it's very difficult not to be at war with ourselves because we're ambitious. Of course, we want to be better. But if you're stuck, it means that you have to spend a little more time trying to discover what your disturbance is and turning your problem into a question. Because until you answer the question of why something is difficult for yourself or why it hurts, you won't be able to comfort yourself and be at peace. You'll just be trying to make yourself better, which has some hope to it, but it may not work. So if there's one inspirational message I'd like to give everybody today, it's to have faith that slowing down and getting away from a problem and spending time with a question will take you further, will expand your consciousness, because Your brain is patterned. The synapses that wire together, fire together, and then you predict the future based on that patterning. So when something bad happens, we predict we won't be loved, we won't be successful. And we don't know this about our brain. We just think that what we think is true. We just really believe that we are not going to get things and we get discouraged. So it's very important to get to know your brain and get to know how much we create a reality that may not be reality. And to do that, you have to spend time with yourself, shining a light, finding someone that to bring in to your mind to help you in the currents of emotion, who's experienced in the currents of emotion and can help you navigate them until you can take care of yourself properly instead of just beating yourself up.
Thank you. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
We now have a few questions of a fellow psychology student who's really excited to have you here, especially. We have, how does the compulsion for repetition affect human beings?
Well, it affects them because it's an unconscious process. So we are at the mercy of the repetition compulsion, as Freud called it, and what we now know from neuroscience is synaptic activity that creates predictions. We really believe our consciousness, and this is the new unconscious. It's not that we repress things. It's not that, because we're very aware of what we feel. It's that we really don't see what our brain is doing. And so we operate based on what feels right to us, and we don't question it. And it's very hard to see that self-sabotage. It's hard to see how we anticipate feeling unloved, and then we're angry, and then of course we get unloved because no one wants to love a person who's angry. So the repetition creates reality, and until we can see our minds and have an analyst who can give us a new experience so that we can have new synaptic activity to overwrite the old one, we can relearn. The problem with real life is that people respond to us. If we're angry, they're hurt. In analysis, your analyst is never hurt. He just wants to understand it. So there you have a chance to unpack and to look at what your brain is doing, because you just talk about everything. So this is the goal of a psychoanalysis. And I encourage everybody who's here today to rethink what unconscious is and move from the idea of repression to the idea of just not being able to see how we create consciousness and then predict on the basis of that experience.
Thank you, Doctor. Touching up again on the love topic, what do you think Lacan means when he mentions that only love allows enjoyment to condescend desire?
You see, my interpretation of that idea is that when our emotions are too strong, meaning a disturbance, we can't connect to other people beyond it. Remember that Narcissus could only see his own reflection. And we all have areas of narcissism, everybody does, where we are defended against truth. And that in that moment, we're filled with desire. We desire a better life. We feel melancholia. We are alone. And when we can be helped with our disturbance and we can see ourselves, then we can see other people. And instead of saying, my sister's mean, we think, my sister has an unmet need. My sister doesn't see me. I have to talk to my sister differently, and that is love. That is compassion. It starts with seeing another person, it blossoms into empathy, and then it goes into true compassion because we know what it feels like because we have it for ourselves. So that's my interpretation of that Lacan quote, that love, meaning that you are free of disturbance and can see and connect to others without getting paranoid, without getting shattered, it leads you to true compassion and helps with that desire. You're not at the mercy of desire because you can give yourself what you need or grieve what you can't get, and you're okay with the grief.
Thanks. Is it possible to know that emotions are the ones that are affecting you in your life? Sorry, I think we already answered that.
I think we did, yes. I think it is not, we need one of this, let me answer it this way. Defenses, when we defend against other people, when we defend against, to keep our structure straight, if our structure is a structure of feeling alone, we have a mental organization and we feel organized. This is why we don't feel crazy. So defenses are very important because they keep us from having a mental breakdown. We don't want to break down. We need some organization, even if it's bad, around the wrong ideas. So we always work never to challenge defenses. Defenses are important. We've learned to really respect defenses. We respect depression. We respect alcoholism. We respect thought disorders, anxiety disorders. They all have a purpose because they are better than the chaos of a mental breakdown. So you can't really stop having emotions. You can't. What was the question again? How was the question phrased?
Give me a moment to look through it. Oh my God, it's just, there's a lot of people asking a lot of questions.
Let's move on to the next question. I think we answered that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Is there a way to cure this division you mentioned? The one that stops peace from happening within someone.
Is there, what was it? I didn't hear the first part of the question.
Is there a way to cure this division you mentioned? The one that stops peace from happening within someone.
The is to keep the patient talking until they can tell you what their objection is to feeling everything. There's a lot of work being done now in neuroscience on the fragmented self, that we fragment out the parts of ourselves that are unwanted, sometimes even putting bad energies on other people and leaving them. So the more that we help people to tell us their story and explain to us, and it's difficult because sometimes it makes no sense, and staying with it, we always feel the urge to correct things that are crazy and set them right, but we never do that. We just go deeper and deeper, and this creates wholeness until the person does not have to fragment out unwanted parts of the self that they are at war with because they're too disturbing. So as long as you get to speak that, once you speak a truth, you just say everything, then the toxic quality to it disappears. And patients, it could take years to find words because the words of whatever language we speak don't really describe disturbance. You can't describe it. So people borrow words here and there and find new words for themselves. And this creates wholeness. And then you have peace.
Thank you. The next one is, why is anguish a fundamental issue in the clinic?
Why is it an issue in the clinic, anguish? Anguish is our path to knowing that the mental organization is not working and that the defenses are not really adequate, because without anguish, we don't have a compass for where we need to go. All emotions are a compass. We need them to guide our life. We need depression to know we're unhappy. So if you're at war with depression and you just want it to go away, you can't use it as a compass. So we see a lot of anguish. And the anguish is really makes it hard to get to the stories and to keep the patient talking. So sometimes you have to stay very neutral and la-ti-da. You just talk about food and the weather for a while because the anguish is so amazing, until the patient settles into how comfortable you are with anguish and that you can take it. And then they feed off of your comfort with it because you're an experienced guide in these currents of emotion, if you've had good training. And then their anguish turns into thoughts and feelings and ideas and memories, and you go into an easier zone.
Okay, thank you. Why do instincts give a regret? Why do instincts have a regressive and conservative tendency?
I don't know what conservative tendency is. Is this a Freudian? Are we in, I'm not sure in the translation that I'm fully understanding the question, but I can tell you that when babies' needs are not met, they're going to struggle with their instincts always, because children cannot experience too much frustration. They have little hands, little feet. They like happy stories. And if they're exposed to too many big negative feelings, then their instincts to want to hurt somebody or to want to have sex with somebody or for appetite, all of the instincts will not feel good. Now, sometimes people struggle with their instincts through the DNA. And when you can name that instinctual energy in your own analysis, you're in very good shape. But it takes a long time to understand the whole concept of instincts. If you see a baby rooting at the breast and the mother has a full breast for the baby, that baby's going to love their instincts. If the mother can't handle the baby crying and leaves it in a room, that invisible baby will struggle with rage and feel like they're being killed and then want to kill themselves. So instinctual energy can be problematic when early experiences lead us not to enjoy the energies of seeking aggressively, the energy of lusting for life and of feeling very exuberant for life. That can turn into greed if you don't like your energies. It can turn into hatred if you're angry. So this is the problem of instinctual energy.
Okay, that would be all, Doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Doctor, for sharing your knowledge with us. And we hope in the future to collaborate even more in future activities. We thank our audience for following us and for sending their questions. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you so much. It was an honor to be with you. And I thank you for all these wonderful questions. I look forward to hearing from you.
Again, thank you so much. And we hope to see you again.
Bye-bye.